We're pleased to have Secretary Marcia Fudge, Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, with us today to talk about the State of the Union, as well as Black home ownership in the United States. Secretary Fudge, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
If you would share with us what some of the specific steps the Biden administration is taking to increase Black home ownership in the United States.
You know, I'm really glad you asked, because we have been busy at work trying to be sure that communities of color have a fair shot at the American dream, at the ability to purchase a home. When we came into office, we realized that the gap between Black and white home ownership was larger today than it was in 1968. We also realized that because of the basically systemic racism built into the system, we were making it more and more difficult for people of color to buy homes. And so there are a number of things that we have done. The first thing we have done is taken a look at what the major impediments were for Black and brown people to be considered creditworthy. And we found that more than 45% of the people who applied for mortgages that were Black and brown had student debt, and it was being held against them. And so what we have done is recalculate how we look at student debt so that we have, for the most part, neutralized up to about $75,000 worth of student debt so that they can become creditworthy. So that no longer is the kind of impediment that it has always been. Secondly, we've looked at how we can deal with down payment assistance. We know that most people can pay the mortgage. It's the down payment that creates the problem. So we are putting ourselves in a place where we can give, we believe, as much as 10% to borrowers so that they will have a 10% equity position in their homes when they do it. And what we're doing is, instead of making their mortgage a 30-year mortgage, we're making it a 40-year mortgage so that the interest rate is lower and the monthly payments are lower so that they pay it on the back end and have an additional 10 years to do it. We've as well looked at how we determine appraisal values. We know that there is bias in the appraisal process. And what they have done is undervalue homes in communities of color. So we have a report coming out in about 2.5 weeks or 3 to talk about what we found through how much valuation we have lost as communities of color. And then the last thing that we are doing is we are looking at how we give small dollar loans. We know that maybe not Washington, D.C., because it's a very, very high price market, but in most communities across the country, especially in places like where I come from in the Midwest and in the South and others, we have a huge number of homes that may be structurally sound, but have been vacant and abandoned for some time that you can get really for less than $100,000. But up until this point, FHA would not insure them and banks would not loan for them because they didn't make money doing it. So we reversed that. So we're talking now about how we empower and rebuild communities through low dollar loans. So we've done a lot. And if the president can get the Build Back Better plan passed, then we're talking about as much as $150 billion for housing alone, which would not only deal with resiliency, because we know climate change is a major issue in our neighborhoods. We're going to clean up Superfund sites and brownfields, because we also know that about 1 in 4 Black or brown people live within a very short distance of these sites, and it is making us sick. So the president is looking at it as a whole. We have a lot of work to do because there is a lot of discrimination that we found in the system. And so as we look at housing through an equity lens, we know we have a lot of work to do, but the president is making sure that we get it done.
What are some of the things that you think African Americans should really have focused on as it relates to the president's State of the Union and home ownership? Are there some highlights that you could possibly point to that folks should have focused on?
I think people need to focus on the president's economic message in its entirety. We know that we are in a situation today where inflation and the cost of goods is continuing to rise. We know that we have a supply and demand issue in housing, period, across the board. There just isn't enough housing. And so when you don't have enough housing, the prices continue to rise. It's just basic supply and demand. We also know that we do not have enough low income and moderate income housing. And so we have to talk about how we build that and how we make the market more affordable. And lastly, we need to think about how the president addresses the needs of childcare, which is a major issue for most families, senior care. We know that we need to take care of our seniors and our children, and we have not been doing a good job at that as a nation. How we get the cost of goods down and how we get the supply chain moving again. So I hope that they will take from the speech the things that this country needs to do, but additionally, the things that have been done. People forget that we've come a long way since President Biden and Vice President Harris took office. A lot of things have happened. And so let's look at where we have come. We have got the strongest economy that we've ever had. Almost 400,000 jobs over the last, well, really less than a year. The economy growing at a faster rate than it ever has. We look at how we have gotten more people back to work. We're looking at how we educate our young people. There are a lot of good things that have been done. And at some point, somebody needs to listen to that story as well.
How did your parents define generational wealth, and how does your opinion of generational, or your definition of generational wealth, differ perhaps from theirs?
First off, I'm not sure that my family even knew what generational wealth was. Their philosophy was, you buy something you get something that's your own. This is how my parents and grandparents thought. And so they came together literally to buy a home. I lived in a house growing up with my grandparents, my mother, my great grandparents, and aunt and uncle and their kids in a duplex. But that's how we could afford to get our own little piece of the pie. But as of course we understood more about finances, we understood that that's how you begin to build wealth, is through owning a home or owning property. And that is the way most people, Black or white, start to build wealth, is through home ownership. And I would say that probably I differ only because I know more, because I've been exposed to more, because I understand more. I mean, obviously, I make more money than my parents or grandparents. I have a better education. I'm the first college graduate in my family. So I do look at things differently because I have been exposed to things in a very different way.
Thank you so very much for spending this time with us. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.